I can't stop thinking about you. Meet me tonight. Those 6 words flashed on my husband's phone screen, the cruelest betrayal I could ever imagine, right there in bright, unforgiving light. I froze. The world around me blurred, colors draining away as the ground dropped beneath my feet. The sound of waves crashing against the shore was drowned out by the pounding of my heart, loud, erratic, and suffocating. Jonathan stood just feet away, unaware that his entire world was about to unravel. Minutes ago, we had been celebrating the dream vacation I had begged for, a chance to escape, to reconnect, to heal, but the message shattered every illusion, every promise, every carefully constructed lie. I held the phone trembling in my hand, the weight of that text heavier than any anchor. That was the moment I realized my marriage was a lie. And the woman I thought I was, obedient, hopeful, trapped, was dying. What followed was a choice: surrender to the heartbreak or rise from the ashes. I chose to rise. This wasn't just a vacation gone wrong. It was my rebirth. The sun rose slowly over the turquoise horizon, its gentle light spilling like molten gold onto the glassy ocean. Yet inside me, a storm raged with no sign of calming. The quiet beauty of the morning clashed violently with the chaos spinning inside my mind. A tumult of betrayal, disbelief, and raw, aching pain. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cold linen whispering beneath me, my fingers gripping the fabric as if it could anchor me to something real. The message on Jonathan's phone burned itself into my thoughts, relentless and merciless. I can't stop thinking about you. Meet me tonight. Those words weren't just a text. They were a verdict. The final proof that the man I had trusted, loved, and vowed to build a life with had already chosen someone else. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. Crying felt like surrender, and surrender was not in my nature. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to focus, to begin untangling the mess of emotions knotting my chest. Memories flooded back. The smiles that had felt forced, the late nights he claimed were work, the subtle distance that had crept between us over the years. I had ignored the signs, chalked them up to stress, or worse, blamed myself. But now, the truth was undeniable. I rose and moved to the balcony overlooking the villa's lush gardens. The scent of jasmine and salt hung in the air, a cruel reminder of the paradise we had once dreamed of. Somewhere down there, Jonathan laughed with someone else, a laugh that no longer belonged to me. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, the sting grounding me. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The first step was acceptance. I had to face the devastation before I could build anything new. That meant walking through the fire of my shattered illusions and finding the ember of strength beneath. I sought solace in the quiet moments, journaling my thoughts, running barefoot along the beach, letting the waves wash away the bitterness that threatened to consume me. With each sunrise, I reclaimed a piece of myself that had been lost in years of silence and compromise. Jonathan remained oblivious, wrapped in his web of lies. But I was watching, waiting, planning. Because after rebirth, I was no longer the woman who would be broken by betrayal. I was the woman who would rise, stronger, wiser, and free. As the vacation's golden days slipped by, I mapped my escape, not just from Jonathan, but from the cage of expectations and fears that had bound me. Freedom was no longer a distant dream. It was within reach. The soft hum of the ocean at night had once been a lullaby, soothing and familiar. Now it pulsed like a relentless heartbeat, syncing with the storm awakening within me. The villa, bathed in moonlight and shadow, felt like both a cage and a crucible, a place where the old self would burn away, and a new woman would be forged. I stood before the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, the soft fabric of a silk robe slipping from my shoulders. The reflection that stared back was unfamiliar, eyes hardened by betrayal, jaw clenched with newfound resolve. My long, dark hair cascaded loosely, wild and untamed, much like the thoughts racing through my mind. The woman I had been, hopeful, obedient, silent, was gone. In her place stood someone ready to claim her own voice, her own power. The night stretched on as I sat cross-legged on the balcony, the cool sea breeze brushing against my skin, carrying with it the scent of salt and distant rain. I pulled out my journal, a gift I had neglected for years, and began to write. Words poured out like a river breaking free from a dam. Fears, dreams, anger, hope. Each sentence was a brick laid on the foundation of my rebirth. Days blended into weeks, but each morning brought deliberate choices to exercise my body, to nurture my mind, to reclaim control. I found solace in early runs along the beach, my feet sinking into the wet sand, the rhythm of my breath steadying the storm within. I practiced meditation, learning to listen to the quiet strength inside, the part of me that refused to be broken. But rebirth wasn't just internal. It demanded action. I began to plan my future, not around Jonathan's lies, but on my own terms. I researched opportunities, connected with friends I had drifted from, and rediscovered passions I had shelved for years. The realization was liberating. Freedom was a process, not an event. One afternoon, while exploring the nearby town market, I encountered a small boutique owned by a woman whose warmth and strength radiated effortlessly. We struck up a conversation, a lifeline of encouragement and possibility. Her words stayed with me. "You are not defined by who betrayed you, but by how you rise after." Back at the villa, Jonathan remained oblivious to the transformation taking place. His texts, once so frequent, grew distant and perfunctory. I no longer responded. Silence became my shield. The woman who had been invisible was now a force emerging from the shadows. As the vacation neared its end, I stood once more on the beach, the sun setting behind me in a blaze of amber and violet. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, vast, unpredictable, full of promise. I realized then that true freedom was not about escape, but about embracing the power to choose. And I was ready to choose myself. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains, casting pale gold across the cool marble floor. Outside, the world was waking. Birds chirped softly, waves lapped rhythmically against the shore, and the scent of salt mingled with blooming frangipani. Yet inside the villa, the air felt charged, electric with unspoken tension. Today was the day I would face Jonathan, the man who had shattered my trust, whose betrayal had pushed me to the edge and forced me into a rebirth I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant white dress that caught the light with quiet grace. It was a symbol, not just of the life I was leaving behind but of the strength I was stepping into. My hair flowed freely, framing my face, eyes clear and unwavering. My heart pounded beneath my ribs, a storm of fear, anger, and something deeper, the fierce determination to reclaim my power. The villa's grand hallway felt colder than usual as I stepped inside, the walls echoing the soft click of my heels. Jonathan sat in the living room, his casual posture and forced smile a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes, quickly masked by defensiveness. "We need to talk," I said, voice steady but sharp. He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, the room shrinking around us. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I broke it. "I saw the messages, Jonathan, the lies, the betrayals. How long has this been going on?" His eyes darkened, guilt and frustration warring behind his mask of arrogance. "It's complicated," he began, voice low. "You don't understand." I shook my head, feeling the chains of my past snap one by one. "I understand enough. I understand that you chose her over me, over us. And I'm done pretending that's okay." Tears threatened, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. This confrontation wasn't about breaking down. It was about breaking free. Jonathan's defenses crumbled, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I thought I knew. Lost, flawed, but no longer my concern. I stood tall, the weight of years lifted with each step away from him. "I'm leaving this behind. I'm reclaiming my life, my freedom, my happiness. And you will never control me again." The words hung in the air, resolute and final. Outside, the ocean breeze caught the hem of my dress as I stepped onto the balcony. The horizon stretched endlessly before me, a vast, untamed expanse filled with possibility. The past was behind me. The future was mine to write. The sun had barely crested the horizon when I stepped out of the villa, the cool morning air filling my lungs like a baptism. Every breath was a reminder that I was alive, truly alive, for the first time in years. The world was waking up around me, bathed in soft amber light that promised new beginnings. The distant crash of waves mingled with the hum of early vendors setting up their stalls, the scent of fresh bread and tropical fruits wafting through the salty air. The town's heartbeat was steady and real, a sharp contrast to the storm that had raged within me for so long. I carried a small bag, light and unburdened, filled with essentials and a notebook where I'd scribbled plans, dreams, and reflections. With every step along the narrow cobblestone streets, I felt the weight of my past loosen, the chains of doubt and pain slowly falling away. The people I passed greeted me with curious smiles or polite nods, strangers unaware of the revolution happening within me. Finding a quaint cafe tucked between vibrant markets and blooming bougainvillea, I settled into a corner seat with a cup of steaming coffee. The rich aroma grounded me, a sensory anchor in this unfamiliar freedom. As I sipped, I pulled out my journal and began to write, not just words, but a dialogue with myself. Questions, hopes, fears. Pages filled with dreams I'd buried. Promises I intended to keep to myself. Freedom, I realized, was not simply escaping my husband's betrayal. It was reclaiming my identity, my desires, my voice. It was learning to stand alone without fear. But with freedom came challenges I hadn't anticipated. Loneliness whispered in quiet moments. Doubt crept in like shadows at dusk. The comfort of routine was gone, replaced by a vast, intimidating unknown. One afternoon, wandering the bustling market, I met a woman whose smile was warm and genuine. She introduced herself as Lila, a local artist whose resilience and creativity inspired me. Our conversations became a balm. Stories shared, laughter exchanged, and the beginnings of a new friendship rooted in strength and hope. Back at my modest apartment, evenings were often quiet. I reflected on the path ahead, the career I wanted to pursue, the relationships I needed to rebuild, and the love I had yet to find. Jonathan was a chapter closed, but my story was just beginning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, I stood on my balcony, the cool breeze wrapping around me like a promise. I was free, and this time, I would write my own ending. The days stretched forward like an open road, each one a step into uncharted territory. The comfort of the familiar had vanished, replaced by the exhilarating yet daunting expanse of possibility. Every morning was a blank page, every choice an act of reclaiming the life I had lost, and the woman I was becoming. My new apartment was modest but alive with sunlight that spilled through large windows and danced across bare wooden floors. It was a far cry from the grandeur of the villa, but it smelled like freedom, paint, fresh linens, and a hint of jasmine from the small potted plant I tended with care. The space became my sanctuary, a canvas where I could start anew. Work was the next frontier. With years of experience buried beneath the weight of a crumbling marriage, I dusted off my skills and reached out to contacts long neglected. The uncertainty was daunting, but the fire within pushed me forward. Days were filled with phone calls, interviews, and endless cups of coffee at bustling cafes where I often found myself observing strangers, each person a story of resilience and hope, reflecting my own journey. Lila, the artist I'd met at the market, became a pillar in this new chapter. Her creativity and courage inspired me, and our friendship blossomed over shared dreams and candid conversations beneath starlit skies. One evening, as we walked along the beach, she turned to me and said, "Scarlette, you're not just surviving, you're becoming—" Her words settled in my heart, a soothing balm for the wounds still healing. Yet the path wasn't without its shadows. Memories of Jonathan lingered, ghosts in quiet moments, the ache of betrayal whispering doubts. One rainy afternoon, while lost in thought at a local bookstore, I ran into someone unexpected. A man whose eyes held a familiar kindness and a hint of something more. Elias. He had been a quiet presence during the upheaval, a steady hand when the world threatened to unravel. Our chance meeting reignited a connection tempered by shared history and hard-won trust. We spent hours talking, the rain pattering softly outside, bridging the gap between past pain and hopeful future. As days turned to weeks, Elias and I grew closer, navigating the delicate balance between healing and opening our hearts again. Trust was fragile, but the promise of love, real, unconditional, was a light I hadn't dared to hope for. With each step, personally and professionally, I was rebuilding a life on my terms. The scars remained, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they were the map of a journey from heartbreak to strength. Standing once more on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, I whispered to the night, "I am free. I am whole. I am ready." The scent of fresh rain lingered in the air as dawn broke over the city, washing the streets with a renewed sense of possibility. Each morning felt like a victory, a quiet declaration that I was no longer defined by my past, but by the choices I made moving forward. Work had become more than a necessity, it was my anchor, my proving ground. With every project completed, every challenge met, I rebuilt not only my career but my confidence. The woman who had once stood silent and broken was now making her voice heard, loud and clear. Elias was there through it all. His support unwavering, his presence a steady flame in the storm. Our relationship deepened with shared laughter, late-night conversations, and the comforting knowledge that, together, we could face whatever came next. One evening, under a sky thick with stars, he took my hand gently and said, "You've come so far, Scarlette. I'm proud of you." But life, ever unpredictable, had new challenges waiting. A call from an unexpected source pulled me into a confrontation with my past, a chance to face the remnants of betrayal and claim closure. It was a moment I had both dreaded and secretly awaited. The encounter was raw and charged with emotion. Words were exchanged, some sharp as knives, others hesitant and trembling. I stood firm, no longer afraid, no longer willing to be silenced. That day I reclaimed my narrative, drawing a line between who I was and who I was becoming. As the days unfolded, I realized freedom wasn't a destination but a journey, filled with setbacks and triumphs, heartbreak and healing. And with Elias by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever the future held. The tides were turning. And so was I. The momentum of change propelled me forward like a wave, powerful, relentless, and full of promise. With each passing day, the contours of my new life became clearer, painted in bold strokes of independence and hope. A breakthrough opportunity arrived when I was offered a leadership role at a rising company, a chance to not only rebuild my career but to redefine my purpose. The challenge was daunting, but the thrill of stepping into the unknown ignited a fire I hadn't felt in years. Elias celebrated with me, his smile warm and genuine. We spent evenings planning for the future, dreaming aloud beneath the soft glow of city lights. His presence was a balm to the scars etched deep within me. Yet, life's serenity was fragile. One morning, a message arrived. A reminder that the past was never far behind. An anonymous tip warned of someone watching, waiting for a moment to strike. The revelation shook me, rekindling fears I thought were buried. The freedom I cherished suddenly felt precarious, like walking a tightrope over an unseen abyss. But I refused to retreat. Instead, I fortified my resolve, surrounding myself with trusted friends and allies. I learned to listen to the subtle signs, a glance, a whisper, a shadow moving just beyond sight. Through it all, Elias remained my unwavering partner, his support steady and fierce. Together, we navigated the complexities of healing while standing guard against the unknown threats lurking in the dark. Standing on the balcony of my new apartment, the city sprawled before me like an open book. The lights twinkled with endless possibility, and I knew one thing for certain. No matter what storms lay ahead, I would face them head-on. Because this was my life, my freedom, my story. The city pulsed beneath me, a sprawling mosaic of shimmering lights and endless possibilities. From the balcony of my new apartment, I watched as life moved forward in waves, people chasing dreams, hoping for tomorrow, unaware of the battles fought in silence. Yet even in this glow, shadows stirred. The anonymous message had unsettled me more than I cared to admit. It wasn't just a warning, it was a reminder that my past had claws, and they had not fully released their grip. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar face, every whispered phone call, carried the weight of potential danger. Days became a blur of heightened awareness. I noticed subtle changes, familiar footsteps lingering too long, my car's engine humming at odd hours, strange emails that disappeared before I could open them. Paranoia threatened to take root, but I fought it fiercely. I was no longer the woman broken by betrayal. I was a survivor, a warrior. Elias stood steadfast by my side, his presence a shield against the creeping darkness. He took to studying security protocols, installing cameras and alarms, and coaching me on vigilance without allowing fear to consume. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, Elias and I pored over recent events, piecing together the puzzle. "Someone's trying to rattle you," he said, tracing lines on a map dotted with red pins. "But they're hiding something bigger." Our investigation led us into the labyrinth of corporate espionage and personal vendettas. We uncovered a web of deceit linking back to Jonathan's circle, allies who had never truly let go, envious rivals and opportunists waiting to exploit weakness. Each revelation cut deeper, but also steeled my resolve. The fight was no longer just for freedom, it was for justice and peace. Amid the tension, moments of tenderness with Elias grew more precious. One quiet night, wrapped in a shared blanket and soft conversation, I realized that love, like strength, could rise from the ashes. Yet as the city slept, the shadows plotted, and I knew the next move could change everything. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance between vigilance and the fragile peace I fought so hard to nurture. The city outside my windows sparkled under a moonlit sky, but beneath its gleaming surface, unseen forces stirred, whispers of old enemies plotting, alliances shifting in the shadows. Each morning began with a ritual, checking security feeds, reviewing emails, planning the day's steps with Elias. Our small apartment had become a fortress of strategy, a sanctuary carved out from the chaos. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of jasmine from the balcony garden, a soothing contrast to the tension that never fully left the air. Work demanded focus, a welcome distraction and a reminder of the life I was reclaiming. Leading a team at the new company tested my limits: negotiations, presentations, crisis management. But with each success, my confidence deepened. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. Elias was more than a partner in this journey. He was my anchor. Our evenings were filled with quiet moments, shared dinners, laughter that echoed softly in the night, conversations that peeled back the layers of fear and hope. One particular night, as rain tapped gently against the windows, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." His words wrapped around me like a warm embrace, a promise I clung to. Yet beneath this calm, the currents of danger pulled stronger. An encrypted message arrived on my phone late one night, its contents chilling, a single line: "You're closer than you think." Sleep eluded me as I lay awake, mind racing through possibilities, tracing threats in every shadow cast by the street lamps below. The following day, a chance encounter unsettled me further. At a bustling cafe, I caught sight of a figure watching me from across the room, an unfamiliar face with eyes sharp and calculating. When our gazes met, a flicker of recognition passed between us, though I couldn't place the man. My pulse quickened. Was this another player in the dangerous game surrounding me? That evening, Elias and I pored over every detail, piecing together fragments of information. The man's presence hinted at a deeper layer of intrigue, one that threatened to unravel everything I had built. The days ahead promised to test not only my strength but the bonds I had forged. As the city thrummed with life, I prepared for the inevitable storm. The cafe was alive with the murmur of conversations, the clinking of cups, and the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans. Yet, beneath the everyday bustle, a silent tension gripped me. That man, the stranger with the piercing gaze, had not left my thoughts since our fleeting eye contact. I sat by the window, nursing a latte, eyes subtly scanning the crowd. Every face seemed to carry a story, but none were as compelling or unsettling as his. His sharp features, the slight curl of his lips, There was something dangerously familiar in his presence. Suddenly he approached, moving with calculated ease. "Scarlette Winters?" His voice was low, steady. "We need to talk." I stiffened, but nodded, curiosity and caution warring within me. He slid into the seat opposite, lowering his voice. "My name is Adrian Blackwell. I was a colleague of Jonathan's, and not just in business." His words hung heavy between us. "I'm here to help," he said quickly, sensing my hesitation. "Because there are things you don't know. Things Jonathan hid. And now they're coming for you." I studied him, searching for deception but found only sincerity tempered by urgency. Over the next hours, Adrian unfolded a story of deep betrayal, corporate espionage, and dangerous alliances. Jonathan's affairs had been more than personal. They were entwined with a plot that threatened not only my life, but the very company I was building. The revelation was a jarring puzzle piece, one that reshaped my understanding of the past and the present. Adrian became an unexpected ally, his insider knowledge a weapon I desperately needed. But trust was fragile, and the shadows were closing in fast. As night fell, I realized that my fight was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The night cloaked the city in shadows as I sat in the dimly lit room, the faint hum of the air conditioner the only sound breaking the heavy silence. Adrian's words echoed in my mind, unraveling the tangled web that had ensnared me. Jonathan's betrayal was deeper than I imagined, not just in heart, but in treachery that threatened everything I was fighting for. Adrian spread out files and photos on the table, each a thread leading to secrets hidden beneath layers of lies. Financial records, coded messages, surveillance photos, all pointing to a conspiracy that reached far beyond our personal lives. "The board was complicit," Adrian explained, voice low and steady. "They covered for Jonathan because he was useful. Until now." I felt a surge of anger mixed with a chilling clarity. This was not just a personal battle. It was a war for control, for power. Elias entered quietly, his gaze sharp as he surveyed the evidence. "We need a plan. And fast." We spent hours strategizing, weighing risks and mapping out moves like chess players anticipating every counter. The danger was real and immediate. They were watching, waiting for a misstep. But amidst the urgency, a quiet moment anchored me. Elias's hand found mine, steady and reassuring. "We're in this together," he whispered. The following days became a whirlwind of covert meetings, encrypted communications, and delicate maneuvers. I embraced my role not just as a victim, but as a force, a woman reshaping her destiny on her own terms. Yet the deeper we dug, the more enemies surfaced, their shadows stretching wider. Jonathan was no longer just my husband who cheated. He was a symbol of a corrupt empire that I was determined to dismantle. And as the battle lines were drawn, I understood, survival required not only strength but unyielding courage. The air inside the conference room was thick with tension, a silent storm waiting to break. The faces around the polished mahogany table were familiar yet hardened, allies and adversaries alike, each carrying the weight of secrets, guilt, and ambition. Today would be the day the past finally collided with the future. I stood at the head of the table, my heart steady, voice calm but unwavering. Months of betrayal, pain, and resilience had led me to this moment. The evidence we had painstakingly gathered was laid bare before them, financial records exposing embezzlement, email chains revealing covert deals, and personal confessions that stripped away facades. Jonathan sat across from me, his once confident gaze faltering under the weight of undeniable truth. The man who had shattered my world now faced the reckoning that was long overdue. As I spoke, I felt a surge of power, not from vengeance, but from the liberation of owning my story. This was more than retribution. It was justice and closure. The boardroom erupted in heated debate, loyalties fractured, and alliances reformed. The corrupt crumbled, replaced by a new vision, one of transparency, integrity, and hope. Outside, the city thrummed with change. News outlets broadcast the fallout, and the public embraced the story of a woman who refused to be broken. In the quiet aftermath, I found myself alone on the balcony of my office, the night sky vast and forgiving. Elias joined me, his presence a steady comfort. "We did it," he said softly. "You did it." I looked at him, a smile breaking through the fatigue and scars. "No," I replied. "We did it." Together. The path ahead was still uncertain, but the chains of the past had been broken. Freedom was no longer a distant dream. It was my reality. As dawn painted the horizon with shades of hope, I breathed deeply and stepped into the future I had fought so fiercely to claim. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they were mine to shape. The scars of the past remained, silent reminders of the battles fought and the strength forged in their fire, but they no longer defined me. I built a life rooted in truth, resilience, and hope. The woman who once stood on the edge of despair had become a beacon of empowerment, not just for myself, but for those who walked similar paths. Elias remained my steadfast companion, our bond deepened by shared trials and unwavering trust. Together, we embraced life's joys and uncertainties, forging a partnership grounded in love and mutual respect. The airline, once a symbol of corruption, transformed under new leadership. Transparency and integrity became its foundation, inspiring a culture where voices were heard and futures reclaimed. Standing on the balcony of our new home, watching the sunrise paint the sky with hues of gold and rose, I felt a profound sense of peace. Freedom was no longer a distant dream or a fragile hope. It was my life. And as the city stirred awake beneath me, I knew this was just the beginning of everything I was meant to be.